The IT sector in Belarus was dynamic and promising in the 2000s up to 2022. A Soviet-style regime was incompatible with the young and talented 21st century population. Have politics outweighed the economy? And where did all this talent go? Who wins? Who loses? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Many see Belarus as a predominantly agricultural country, but apart from the fruits of the soil, it has reaped great benefits from the digital realm. Ever since the country's dictator, Alexander Lukashenko, decreed the establishment of Belarus High Technologies Park, the country's IT sector skyrocketed, creating an anomaly of modernity in an economic model still partly based on Soviet management and planning standards.
The fact that the high-tech park was created by a president's decree, the very fact of this park's existence, gave a huge impulse to the development of the IT industry in general.
Located on the outskirts of Minsk, the Belarusian equivalent of the Silicon Valley has boosted the domestic IT sector's performance and driven the country's investment attractiveness. In 2017, another decree by Lukashenko liberalized the sector, offering perks for companies and IT specialists who registered with the high-tech park.
They were provided with, among other things, fiscal concessions or total tax exemptions, unlimited use of cyber currencies, visa-free entry with a 180-day stay for foreign employees, and so on.
The export value of Belarus's IT industry and the share of the sector in Belarusian GDP grew from 2018 to 2021. The IT phenomenon gave birth to a dynamic and development-minded cohort of cyber elites. Young people gravitated to the IT sector, lured by top domestic salaries and all the West-like boons. Wargaming, a Belarusian video game developer best known for its World of Tanks, was one of the companies that benefited from the regime's IT hype. But the waft of liberal air backfired at the Lukashenko regime. Many of the young, bright IT things entertained a sense of social responsibility, which led them to support the protests against the 2020 rigged presidential elections. As seen in the chart, this declutched the IT sector's growth rate, but did not step on the brakes of its prosperity, either in terms of its share of GDP or the value of exports. 2 years later, Russia's invasion of Ukraine proved a watershed moment for the IT sector. Belarus's involvement rendered cooperation with Minsk toxic, and the Western sanctions put additional strain. This resulted in many European and American businesses withdrawing from the market, laying off some employees and relocating others, mainly to Lithuania and Poland. Despite the initial shock, the sector in 2023 seems to gradually stabilize. Estimates are that the number of IT employees in Belarus exceeds 60,000 people today.
I'm joined today by Kamil Kusiński, a senior fellow at the Department for Belarus, Ukraine and Moldova at the Centre for Eastern Studies. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
We're going to talk about the IT sector in Belarus, which on the face of it seems a very mundane subject, but it's a fascinating one. It seems to have turned around the early 2020s. Can you describe how it appeared before then, and then what happened in 2022?
Yes, we can describe this IT sector in Belarus as a phenomenon because it was built on scratch. Belarusian, in this case, not Belarusian, Belarusian because closer to Russia, authorities, they based on only on staff, on very good programists, very well educated. It comes from very long Soviet tradition when maybe at Soviet time IT sector wasn't very important and very modern, very developed, but some roots are there. In engineering sector, in education of technicians, which was always on a very good level, very high level in Minsk, even in the Soviet Union. So they used this very good staff of lecturers, of specialists, and after that of people who were graduated from IT or technician faculties at Belarusian universities. And if we look at this history, it's very short, because only in 2005 was established High Technology Park, which was main center of IT sector in Belarus. Close to Minsk, almost in Minsk, is in the capital city of Belarus, and fast development of this sector started even later, in 2017, when Lukashenko signed decree, unprecedented decree, which created from this IT sector something like liberal island in state sector in Belarusian economy, very obsolete, very conservative economic model, but this IT sector was very developed, very different, partially based even on British law, which was completely unprecedented in Belarusian terms.
So, if I understand you correctly, they created a professional class of Western-leaning young people.
Mostly young people, mostly people without families, because this is a model of life in this sector, in this, let's say, environment. They were very modern, very different from the rest of society, which was also very important in 2020, when the revolution without happy end, without result, started. Massive protests, demonstrations against forged elections, against Lukashenko, and IT specialists were on a front line.
Well, that's right. I was going to ask you about the role of this sector.
Sector was important. Very.
They're on the front line of the protests against.
Yes, they were important. They were like engine of changes in the society, of some new demands, new expectations. Lukashenko and his regime, they created this sector to earn money. Lukashenko doesn't understand the IT sector at all, and he's even proud of that, because he's very Soviet human being.
So they had this enclave of, for want of a better word, a liberal market economy thinking in a Soviet-era model.
Yes. As I said, it was enclave. It was like island in this sea ocean of very old Soviet model of economy, of thinking about economy. A centralized economy is still there. A state sector, especially in industry, is still there. This is huge majority. Private sector is quite small in Belarus. This is no more than 25% of GDP, which is a critically low level, even in that part of Europe, eastern part of Europe. So IT sector was something completely different, something completely new, and Belarusian regime thinking when was thinking about this sector, they only expected money, good income, and maybe some advertisement of Belarus as a developed country. They also used it was visible before 2020 when was a dialogue with West. They used this sector as a some exhibition of future Belarus. They tried to show a new country, which wasn't true because it was only a small part of economy, but they did it. Yeah. And they didn't understand, as I suppose, as I can look at that from a historical perspective, Lukashenko and his people, they didn't understand consequences of this creation of such huge group of the society, 100,000 of people, mostly in Minsk, very modern people, very demanding people who were very disappointed with state of play in the country, with a situation in the country, very conservative, obsolete policy of the regime. And in 2020, I think that Lukashenko really regretted that he created this social group, and he also expressed his disappointments about IT sector.
Was this group a privileged group, like a kind of nomenclatura or did it was a privileged, or was it just a rich, get rich quick
They've got rich, very active, also in social life. They were very involved, engaged in, for example, charity actions, in social actions. They donated quite much. To also independent initiatives, to civil society. Those links between IT sector and the civil society was also some surprise, I suppose, for Lukashenko. He didn't expect that. He thought that those people would be the same, would be cynical on the same level as he is about the reality, and they weren't. But they of course they didn't become influential nomenclatura. It's not the same to be IT programmist, IT specialist, and for example, minister or director at state company. This is completely different story.
And what happened to them after 2020 to 2022?
It was a very interesting case because after 2020, despite sanctions which were imposed against the regime, against Belarusian economy, IT sector was quite okay. They were quite resilient. The IT sector wasn't embraced by sanctions. We didn't have an embargo directly targeted to IT sector, and this growth of share in Belarusian GDP of IT sector, it was still there. As a maximum level, it was 5.7% of GDP. What they achieved. It was a maximum, and it was in 2021. So one year after all those developments in Minsk, in Belarus, all this crackdown, turmoil, which was observed there, and in terms of sanctions. So it wasn't a turning point. A turning point was completely different, and it was later.
And what did that involve? Did it involve the great emigration of a brain drain of talent to the west or to the east of Europe, Baltic states, that sort of thing?
This is also a very interesting case and interesting question, because despite this emigration, after 2020, when a quite big part, maybe 20% of IT specialists were forced, objectively or subjectively, maybe they felt themselves endangered, and they emigrated. Despite this emigration, IT sector was in very good condition. As I said, they achieved a maximum level of share of GDP. Of course, it was a problem that the perspectives were quite negative for IT sector from the regime. Lukashenko expressed his disappointment about IT specialists. He named them as traitors. I'm pretty sure that Lukashenko still thinks about IT specialists as a traitors, because he gave them so much freedom, and they betrayed him.
So does this mean that there is you mentioned a figure of 20% of the IT specialists left the country, 80% you could say still stayed.
Yes.
How do you account for the fact that they stayed? Because in your paper you wrote that it was a crisis but not a collapse of the IT sector.
Yes, in 2021, in 2020, it wasn't a collapse because, as I said, we didn't have a direct embargo from US or European Union towards IT sector. Embargo was about, for example, oil products, about potassium fertilizers, but not about IT sector. And still, Western partners of IT sector, despite difficult political situation in Belarus, this deep crisis, repressions, they still cooperated with their Belarusian partners, let's say, in that case. As I said, this turning point was later. It was a war, Russian aggression against Ukraine.
How do you see the Belarusian and the Belarusian IT sectors in the next 5 years, for example? Are you going to see the same? Are you going to see a rebuild of the sector? Or is it going to kind of slowly drift westwards?
This is a difficult question, but I think we should avoid radical assessments. because usually radical assessments are not true. We cannot say that IT sector is in very deep crisis on the border with collapse. We cannot say that IT sector will develop, will achieve the same level of development as it was before the war, before 2022. It's not possible so far. They just adapted. They adapted themselves to new circumstances. They adapted to a toxic atmosphere around Belarus, this climate, which is a result of Belarusian, in this case, support of Lukashenko to Russia in context of this aggression against Ukraine. Belarus is co-aggressor against Ukraine, also looking from point of view of international law.
Yes.
In legal context, they are also co-aggressor. So it means that cooperation with Western partners, between IT companies in Belarus and Western partners, Western companies, is not so easy. And that's why we observe decline. But they adapted to some extent. For example, part of Belarusian companies which still are based in Belarus, they have partners, for example, in Russia or in China. This is some way of adaptation, but it doesn't mean that it could compensate at full scale all those losses.
A final question to you. The 20% of IT specialists or so that emigrated from Belarus, are they still playing the same part in the opposition movement that they played before 2022 or 2020?
It's also not so easy. Part of them, they just would like to earn money. Yeah. They don't want to have nothing in common with opposition, who lost in some opinions. It's not my opinion, but maybe some IT specialists could think in that way. But part of them, I would say minority, not very active minority, they still support. They donate, and they provide they financial resources, but also their skills. For example, we know that cyber partisans, this underground organization, Belarusian, which is very active, they of course act from abroad. They have strong support also from IT specialists. Without them, they couldn't take so many information, also classified information from Belarusian sources, from Belarusian structures of authorities.
Kamil Kuszyński, we have to draw it there, but fantastic, very fascinating paper that you wrote about this specialist subject. Thank you very much for coming to the programme.
Thank you very much.
That's it. Do join us next time for How We Got Here.